From the early days of hot rod culture to the supercar wars of the 90s, automakers have always tried to push the envelope. Speed, design, and raw power with a standard. That is certainly not the case in present time, especially with regulators focusing on safety sensors and emissions. But there was a time when engineering ambition moved faster than the law. Usually, when a car company builds something fast, the competition just tries to build something faster. But every once in a while, a car comes along that is so radical, so dangerous, or just so misunderstood that it forces the government to step in. I feel like these stories are the most interesting because they show what happens when car guys stop listening to the rules. Some of these cars were banned, some were sued into oblivion, and others actually forced new laws to be written just to deal with them. I said earlier that engineering used to be the priority, and this list proves it. While most of the cars on this list are considered legends today, at the time they were public enemies. I believe I did a decent job creating this list. Of course, I'm not an expert by any stretch of imagination. I wasn't even born when most of these bans happened, so bear with me. With all that said, I do sure hope you enjoy this week's video. It was definitely a fun one to make. Number 10. Starting off is the AC Cobra, specifically the coupes testing on the British M1 motorway in the early 1960s. Before 1965, British highways didn't actually have a national speed limit. It was just assumed that people would drive reasonably. Then came Carroll Shelby and AC cars. In preparation for Le Mans, the racing team was testing the Cobra Coupe. We are talking about a car powered by a Ford V8, eventually that massive 427, capable of speeds pushing 180 miles per hour. Legend has it that in 1964, a test driver took the Cobra onto the M1 and hit 185 miles per hour. This was in broad daylight with regular traffic around. The British Parliament was reportedly horrified. The idea that a street-legal vehicle could outpace a light aircraft on a public road was just too much. While there is some debate on if this single event caused the change, the 70-mile-per-hour speed limit was introduced shortly after. The Cobra was just too fast for a world without limits. In my book, this is a perfect example of a car that was simply too much for the government to ignore. Number 9. The 1960 to 1963 Chevrolet Corvair. This was GM's attempt to build a European-style compact, and on paper, it was brilliant. It featured an air-cooled, rear-mounted flat six. However, to save on costs, Chevrolet utilized a swing-axle rear suspension design without a front anti-roll bar on the early models. The issue was the physics of that swing axle. Under hard cornering, the rear wheels could tuck under, causing the car to oversteer dramatically and in extreme cases, flip over. This led to Ralph Nader's infamous book, Unsafe at Any Speed. The controversy was so loud, it essentially led to the creation of the NHTSA. While the second-generation Corvair from 1965 solved these issues with a fully independent suspension, and it really does ride like a gem, the damage was done. The government was now watching every engineering decision Detroit made. It's a shame because the Corvair is a unique car, but it will always be the one that brought the government into the design studio. Number 8. Coming in at number 8 is the Porsche 930, better known as the 911 Turbo. Introduced in the mid-70s, this was a homologation special that brought turbocharged technology to the street. Under the rear deck lid was a flat six fed by a massive turbocharger. The problem wasn't the power, which was substantial, it was the delivery. This was early turbo technology. You would put your foot down, wait a few seconds, and then receive a sledgehammer of boost all at once. Combined with the 911's inherent rear-engine bias and a short wheelbase, this created lift-off oversteer. If a driver panicked mid-corner and lifted off the throttle, the rear end would swing around like a pendulum. In countries like Japan and parts of Europe, authorities were alarmed by the accident rate. It earned the nickname the Widowmaker. It wasn't that the car was defective, it just required a level of skill that most rich dentists didn't have. Governments discussed higher insurance mandates and special license requirements just for this specific platform. Number 7. Our seventh spot goes to the Suzuki Samurai. In the mid-80s, this was the it car for high schoolers. It was cheap, rugged, and capable. However, it was also very narrow, short, and had a high center of gravity. In 1988, Consumer Reports announced that the Samurai was not acceptable, claiming it rolled over too easily. The footage of the little Jeep lifting two wheels off the ground sent shockwaves through the Department of Transportation. The government investigation that followed scrutinized the stability of all short-wheelbase SUVs. While the NHTSA eventually declined to issue a recall, stating the car met the standards of the time, the damage was done. Sales tanked, and Suzuki was forced to change the suspension for later models. It shows how a design can be perfectly legal on paper, but still cause a massive government headache in practice. Number 6. The Lotus Carlton takes the number 6 spot. This is a car that the British Parliament actually debated banning. In the early 90s, Lotus took the Vauxhall Carlton, basically a boring sedan you'd see at a grocery store, and turned it into a supercar killer. They strapped on 2 turbos, and the result was 177 miles per hour. To put that in perspective, the police cars in the UK at the time were lucky to hit 120. The Lotus Carlton could hold 170 miles per hour with 4 adults comfortably seated inside. It became a favorite for getaway drivers because nothing the authorities had could catch it. The outcry was massive. Newspapers ran headlines asking why a family saloon needed to do nearly 180 miles per hour. The government faced pressure to limit the top speeds of passenger cars, all because Lotus did too good of a job. It remains one of the only cars to be debated in the House of Commons simply for being too fast. Number 5. Number 5 is the Audi 5000, specifically the models from the mid-80s. This was an aerodynamic marvel, but it became the center of the unintended acceleration panic. Reports started flooding in of Audi surging forward when shifted into drive. The government and media frenzy was intense, with 60 Minutes airing a segment on it. While subsequent investigations largely pointed to pedal misapplication, meaning drivers were stepping on the gas thinking it was the brake, the mechanical layout was blamed. The pedals were placed close together for performance driving, which didn't mesh well with American habits. The direct result of this scare was the government-mandated shift interlock system we have in every automatic car today. You know how you have to press the brake to shift out of park? You can thank the Audi 5000 for that. Number 4. At number 4 is the Porsche 959. This car was a technological tour de force. Twin turbos, all-wheel drive, Kevlar body panels. It was arguably the most advanced car of the 1980s. However, Porsche didn't want to sacrifice 4 of them to the US government for crash testing. Because they refused to destroy the cars to prove they were safe, the 959 was illegal to import or drive on American roads. This didn't stop wealthy collectors from buying them. The cars were impounded by customs and sat in storage for over a decade. The existence of this specific car eventually led to the show or display law in 1999. This legislation allowed cars of significant technological importance to be imported with mileage restrictions. The 959 was so advanced, it literally forced the government to create a loophole just to accommodate it. Number 3. The number 3 spot is occupied by the Ford Pinto. You can't talk about government intervention without mentioning this one. Ford rushed the Pinto into production to compete with the imports. The controversy centered on the fuel tank placement, which was located behind the rear axle. Crash tests revealed that in a rear-end collision, the tank could puncture, leading to fires. But what truly scared the government was the Ford Pinto memo. This internal analysis suggested it was cheaper to pay out lawsuits than to recall the cars. The exposure of this document changed the way the government regulated automotive safety recalls forever. It moved the conversation from simple engineering mistakes to corporate liability. It forced the NHTSA to get much stricter on fuel system integrity. It's a sad story, but a pivotal one for the industry.
Number 2. Runner-up is the 1948 Tucker 48.
Preston Tucker wanted to build the safest car in the world. His design featured a padded dashboard, a pop-out safety windshield, and that center Cyclops headlight that turned with the steering wheel. However, the sheer ambition of the car drew the attention of the Securities and Exchange Commission. While not a safety recall, the government launched a massive investigation into Tucker's funding, effectively accusing him of fraud before the car could even reach mass production. Many believe the government was pressured by the big three automakers, who were terrified of Tucker's innovations. The investigation killed the company after only 51 cars were built. It shows that sometimes the government doesn't ban the car, they bankrupt the builder. Number 1. And that leaves us with the number 1 vintage car that scared governments around the world. It isn't a street car, but the 1955 Mercedes-Benz 300 SLR. Based on the Formula One car of the time, this was an engineering marvel. However, during the 1955 24 Hours of Le Mans, a 300 SLR was involved in the most catastrophic accident in motorsport history. The car launched into the crowd, causing massive casualties. The reaction from governments was swift. France, Germany, Spain, and Switzerland immediately moved to ban motor racing. Mercedes-Benz withdrew from motorsport entirely for decades. While most countries eventually lifted the bans, Switzerland's government ban on circuit racing stood for over 60 years. This singular vehicle event caused governments to look at the automobile not just as a machine, but as a potential weapon. It fundamentally changed liability laws worldwide. So there you have it, the top 10 cars that scared governments. If you'd like to see another list revolved around this topic idea, be sure to like the video so I know. I do apologize if I missed any of your favorites. Life can get busy, and there is a lot of history to cover. I appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next week.